Our story today begins in a dark castle atop a mountain where voices whispered about the Demon King Abyss and a certain young hero. With her back turned, the Demon Queen told her lackey that she didn't need help, as that was something she could handle herself. And turning around, the busty woman gritted her teeth, declaring that just one of her hands would be enough to defeat a child like him. Shortly after, she appears in a forest, and with a fixed gaze, she affirmed that this was the big day. Suddenly, a foot landed on the grass beside her, and an excited, childish voice emerged, enthusiastically calling her Master. A boy with spiky hair and bright eyes appeared smiling. Exclaiming excitedly that she had come, the woman became visibly nervous beside the boy and asked about his hero training, and he replied that he was doing his best. Internally, she thought that this wasn't right and that she needed to remain firm in the face of the situation. And she reflected that, taking advantage of his ignorance about her true identity, she maintained the charade of master and disciple, just so she could watch him closely and kill him more easily. Meanwhile, the innocent boy smiled with genuine joy. Then he asked if she didn't think he had changed, and she questioned in what way. Excitedly, the boy flexed his biceps, saying that day he had done 16 push-ups, surpassing his previous record of 15. Meanwhile, the demon thought to herself that this was pathetic. Next, he said he had even gained some muscle, and excitedly suggested she touch his arm, leaving Abyss surprised. Then, the boy presses his small arm against his master's chest, who becomes visibly flushed and uncomfortable. And upon touching his bicep, she stated that he wasn't as weak as she thought. At this, the boy asked excitedly if it was true, and smiling, he asked if he was really getting strong. Abyss, even more flushed and nervous, let out a sigh and fell backward. Shortly after, she admitted, somewhat reluctantly, that perhaps he had gotten a little stronger, making the boy smile with joy. Full of confidence, the boy imagined himself defeating the Demon King and exclaimed that he could already beat him, leaving Abyss shocked while internally questioning her own identity. Next, he pondered aloud who would be stronger, his master or the Demon King. At this, Abyss, relieved, affirmed that it was good he hadn't realized the truth yet. Excited, the boy suggested they have an arm wrestling competition to test their strength, catching her completely by surprise. But with a determined look and a dark aura enveloping her hand, the Demon Queen affirmed that this was the perfect chance to finally defeat him. A short time later, the two began the competition. The boy exerted tremendous force, his face red and sweating, trying to move Abyss's arm, which remained motionless. And with a slight movement, Abyss easily won the arm wrestling match, leaving the boy collapsed over the tree trunk while she stood speechless and slightly flushed. Her hand overcame his without any effort, revealing the abyss of strength between them. And looking down, Abyss admitted to herself that she had held back on purpose to not humiliate him further. At this, the boy began to cry, letting out a groan of frustration while pounding his fists against the ground. Trying to console him, the Demon Queen told him to calm down and that he would still grow, stating that she only won because she was an adult. But the little hero continued to cry. Amidst his tears, he lamented being so weak, even though he was the hero, and said that this way, he would never be able to save the world. Abyss's eyes discreetly filled with tears, feeling the unexpected impact of the boy's pure words. Her hand reached out towards him, but still hesitant. Then she hugged him tenderly, saying that his courage in facing the Demon King was incredible. And amidst her immense melons, his eyes still full of tears, the boy asked if she would return the next day. With a gentle smile, Abyss answered yes, trying to act natural in front of the boy. But back in the dark castle, the Demon Queen's agony continued, thinking that she needed to stop faking that false smile. The next day, now wearing her dark mask, she seemed determined and unshakable, ready to sustain her charade for a while longer. Then, her lackeys commented that she was unstoppable, and wondered if the hero was truly such a great threat. But, with a piercing gaze, she coldly warned them to never intervene in her personal fight. Intimidated, the lackeys murmured about her terrifying gaze and her oppressive presence. Meanwhile, the poor woman tried to assure herself that this time, it would work. Back in the forest, the boy trained excitedly, striking a hanging log with his wooden sword that swung with the impact. Soon he ran to Abyss with a radiant smile, holding his sword, and asked excitedly if she could teach him swordsmanship that day. The Demon Queen seemed a bit nervous, averting her gaze, and the boy asked if something was wrong, but she quickly denied it. And while the boy went back to training, striking the log with enthusiasm, Abyss watched him in silence, reaffirming her plan to get close and attack him at the first chance. The boy continued his training with dedication, now practicing dodges and quick attacks with wooden daggers, under the attentive and calculating gaze of the busty woman. Then she commented that, with so much indecision, he wouldn't get anywhere. Then, placing a hand on his back to correct his posture, she instructed him to put more power into his hips. And following her instructions, the boy struck the log with more force and precision, hitting it squarely with his sword. Excited, he celebrated the hit, shouting that he had done it. But, in the moment of distraction, the log swung back and hit him on the head. Fallen on the ground, the boy mumbled in pain, while Abyss ran over worriedly, asking if he was okay and if he was hurt. Suddenly, she stopped in shock, questioning why she was so worried about him. Reminding herself that she was the Demon Queen, and hiding her face with her hands, she thought that she couldn't let her subordinates see her in that state of vulnerability. At that moment, a slime appeared, hopping on the grass nearby. Upon seeing it, Abyss felt an internal relief, affirming that since slimes have no intelligence, her true identity would remain safe. And the boy, full of determination, told his master to let him take care of that dreadful creature because after all, he was the hero. Without hesitation, he went after the slime, brandishing the wooden sword forcefully and shouting excitedly while trying to hit the creature. However, the blow ricocheted, and the boy ended up falling awkwardly face first onto the grass. Immediately after, the slime jumped onto his head. For his master, this was good, since as the Demon King, she couldn't eliminate her own subordinates directly. As the slime began to envelop the boy's face, suffocating him, Abyss coldly affirmed that this would be the hero's final fall. But, upon seeing the scene, an expression of shock and sincere worry appeared on her face, paralyzing her critical thoughts for an instant. The boy struggled desperately under the slime, while she remained motionless, clearly torn between her original plan and something stronger within her. Suddenly, a sharp cry escaped her lips, and in the blink of an eye, our little hero found himself standing. Surprised, he called out for you, trying to understand what had happened. But suddenly, the slime hit him again. With that, the boy fell to the ground again, completely breathless, and the goo began to suffocate him. Impatiently, the Demon Queen yelled at the boy, asking why he aimed for greater things if he couldn't even defeat a simple slime. Then, he began to answer, and with renewed determination, the boy stood up, wielding his small sword, and declared that, because he was the hero, it was his duty to protect his companions, even if he himself was in danger. Abyss, with parted lips, seemed genuinely touched by the young hero's words. At that moment, the slime prepared to attack again, and the boy gritted his teeth, ready to face the challenge once more. But before it could attack, the Demon Queen released a powerful aura, staring down the slime, which retreated in fear. With that, quickly, the slime fled, terrified through the grass. And happy with the end of the fight, the boy ran to her, calling for his master. Meanwhile, Abyss thought to herself that she couldn't act unfairly towards her subordinates, as that would lower her points as Demon Queen. Then, the boy asked anxiously if she was hurt, and she, somewhat embarrassed, replied that she was fine. With tears in his eyes and a sigh, the boy murmured that it was a relief. And seeing the boy's great concern, Abyss became emotional, feeling her chest tighten in a way she could no longer ignore. Then, she hugged him again, saying that despite being small and weak, he had a strong heart. A short time later, back at the castle, the masked Demon Queen's torment continued, while her lackeys commented on rumors about the hero's companion being a fierce warrior. In the great throne room, the subordinates watched Abyss seated, one praising her determination, and another admitting that the young hero seemed a worrisome enemy. In the midst of the crowd, a skeleton and an ogre exchanged fears, one questioning if they would be defeated, and the other lamenting that he hadn't even found a girlfriend yet. Seeing her subordinates' fear grow, Abyss thought she needed to act soon to control the situation. Suddenly, a huge, furry paw appeared at the front of the crowd, and the creature's deep voice mocked, calling her a pathetic demon queen. It was the general of the demon beasts, Lion. Then, a hooded servant dared to accuse him of disrespecting the sovereign, but Lion coldly retorted that he was only speaking the truth. The general stated that he had always been against her coronation, and that she would never compare to the former demon king. Roaring in fury, he declared he would take the throne if necessary, and that not even the hero could withstand his overwhelming power. But before he finished his speech, Abyss advanced without hesitation and landed a devastating punch right in the middle of his face. With disdain, the demon queen questioned if that was the supposed strength of the general of the beasts, calling him disappointing. Lion, still fallen and furious, asked what she had said, and Abyss coldly retorted that she could imagine him being easily defeated. Looking down on him with superiority, she challenged him, asking if he really wanted to test his strength against hers. Seeing the scene, the subordinates erupted in joy, shouting that with the demon queen there, the hero didn't seem so scary, and that General Lion looked just like a scared kitten. Amidst the shouting, everyone began to acclaim, "Long live the demon queen!" Zrenia filling the hall with enthusiasm. For the demonic beings, the hero was a calamity, and the demon queen existed to protect and guide them in the face of this constant threat. This was her responsibility, and Abyss carried this mission in her heart better than anyone else. Now, back in the forest, our protagonist removed her mask, promising herself that this time she would show the hero the true and terrifying nature of the demon queen. At that moment, moment, the boy appeared smiling, carrying a pot, cheerfully calling for his master and asking if she wanted to eat together. With that, all of Abyss's determination crumbled in an instant, and she quickly agreed, unable to maintain her pose. With a red face, she thought that she needed to resist. Even though she found our little hero adorable, the boy innocently explained that he prepared the food because he noticed how tired she seemed, leaving the Demon Queen shocked and full of guilt at such kindness. Internally, she tried to convince herself not to hesitate and not to yield, reaffirming to herself that she was the powerful Demon Queen, and remembering her loyal subordinates who adored her. Abyss thought that, as their queen, she couldn't possibly fail. Now, fiercely, she gritted her teeth, vowing that she wouldn't allow herself to be defeated so easily. But crestfallen, the boy asked innocently if she wasn't hungry, breaking all her resistance again. Completely defeated, she answered him, and with that, admitted to herself that she just wanted to see that cute little face smiling every day of her life. Relieved, the boy smiled and offered the spoon, telling her to eat as much as she wanted without worrying. With her cheeks full, Abyss ate enthusiastically, and such culinary skill made her wonder if that was the hero's true power. Back at the castle, her lackeys commented worriedly about how exhausted she seemed, imagining what kind of brutal battle she must have faced. Walking through the corridors, she tried to reassure them, saying she just needed to rest. Impressed, the subordinates praised the queen's bravery, promising eternal loyalty. Meanwhile, Lion concluded that if the queen was exhausted, the hero must be too, seeing the perfect opportunity to act. Then, with clenched fists, the lunatic declared that he would finish off the hero and take the throne for himself. A short time later, again in the forest, the little hero was brutally thrown to the ground. Lion, the general of the beasts, approached the fallen boy, mocking the Demon Queen's concern, stating that the hero seemed absurdly weak before him, and smiling, he wondered if the problem was that he was too strong, while his beastly subordinates appeared to cheer for his victory. From atop a cliff, the Demon Queen arrived in time to see the scene, sighing as she realized that it was too late to intervene. And even though she wished to defeat him with her own hands, she knew that facing Lion, the boy wouldn't stand a chance. But, defying all expectations, the boy stood up, wielding his sword with unshakable courage. And he charged Lion with all his might, but his strike was merely a breeze against the enemy's colossal body. With a brutal attack, the general threw him far away, making his small body hit the rocks hard. From afar, the Demon Queen watched in silence until some drops of sweat began to fall from her face. Bloody and staggering, the boy rose again, grasping the sword with both hands. Seeing all this, Abyss clenched her fist until it bled, unable to hide the fury growing inside her. And amidst all this massacre, our little hero's voice still echoed forcefully across the field. I am the hero. With his paw on him, Lion pressed him against the ground, crushing him without mercy. With contempt, Lion said that this was reality, and that holding grudges only fueled the failure of the weak, and threatened that, after killing the boy, he would do the same to his friend, with that, drawing a look of terror from the little hero. Then, he imagined the feline tearing the life out of his master with its huge claws. Then, he clenched his fist tightly, and with tears streaming and fury taking hold of him, he shouted with all his might that Lion should never dare to touch the people he loved. But Lion didn't care at all and prepared to crush him with a brutal stomp. And seeing a magnificent glow emanating from the boy, the Demon Queen watched, shocked, not understanding how that power could emerge so suddenly. Then, the boy leapt explosively, delivering an upward strike full of determination and power. With that, a wave of energy devastated the area, kicking up rocks and dust in all directions. Lion, completely frightened, fell sitting on the ground, his eyes wide. After the blow, our little hero remained standing, still with his sword in hand. Lion and his henchmen were paralyzed with fear, shocked by the sudden power he displayed, and with bulging eyes, the general desperately shouted for his subordinates to flee as fast as possible, stating that the hero was too dangerous. Right after the superhuman effort, the boy lost his strength and collapsed to the ground, falling unconscious from sheer exhaustion. And finally, the Demon Queen descended from the cliff and approached slowly, impressed as she admitted that she hadn't expected so much hidden power. Observing the destruction around, she concluded that if she let that grow, the boy would soon become a real threat to the demons. Then, her gaze fixed on his sword, and holding it, she walked slowly towards the unconscious boy, her thoughts plunged into deep conflict. With an almost inaudible murmur, she pointed the sword upwards, feeling the weight of the decision she needed to make right then and there. But, with a final thread of consciousness, the boy smiled and asked to be praised for having managed it alone. Upon hearing those words, Abyss stopped instantly. Observing his small, fragile body from above, suddenly she began to get emotional, and under the light of the full moon, she moved away and murmured to herself that he was a cheater. Then, she took him to a small cave and laid him down to sleep, leaving 2 apples beside him. Then, now with her mask on, she moved away from the cave and warned him to prepare for what was to come. The very next day, the Demon Queen walked through the forest again, and was left speechless upon seeing her disciple training training again. Hidden behind a tree, she affirmed that he might be weakened by the previous day's exhaustion, deciding just to observe him. Suddenly, the boy pointed in the opposite direction and, full of determination, ordered the Demon Queen to stop, leaving Abyss paralyzed in shock. Wielding his sword, the boy stated that, as the true hero, he would protect the village from evil. Then, she remembered the devastating power unleashed by the boy the previous day, and watched the hero training alone, striking the air with his sword while shouting excitedly at an invisible enemy. Stunned, she affirmed she didn't understand what he was doing. Suddenly, he turned to an imaginary version of her and asked her to hide behind him. It was then that she finally understood. The hero was training to protect the villagers in the future. Then, gritting his teeth, he affirmed that although the imaginary demons seemed strong, the humans would not lose. Shortly after, the Demon Queen came out from behind the tree and the boy greeted her excitedly while she asked what he was doing there. With a radiant smile, he replied that he was training to be a hero, practicing every day and visualizing how to act. He then recounted that the previous day he dreamed that he fought against a monstrous lion, and this made him feel he needed to try even harder. But he admitted that he still couldn't visualize everything correctly, making Abyss ask if he really thought that all of that had just been a dream. But with his eyes shining, he asked for help. Internally, Abyss affirmed that this was the perfect opportunity to take advantage of the role-playing and finally finish him off. Then, blushing and striking a scary pose, Abyss declared herself the Demon Queen, promising to defeat the hero without mercy. Immediately after, she covered her face, embarrassed, admitting it was too embarrassing, leaving the boy in absolute silence. With eyes full of tears and puffed cheeks, the boy began to sob. Then, he complained that this was a life or death battle and asked her to take it more seriously, making Abyss apologize. Inside, she swore she would do better next time, and that this training would also help deceive the hero. Regaining her composure, Abyss struck an imposing pose and shouted that it was foolish to challenge the Demon Queen, declaring the field the hero's grave. Then, an awkward emptiness hung in the air. Not knowing what to do in the face of the boy's lack of response, Abyss blushed to the tips of her ears and pleaded for him to at least react somehow. Finally, with shining eyes, the boy praised her, saying that his master seemed incredibly real, while Abyss internally affirmed she was the real Demon Queen. With the sword firm in his hands, the boy promised never to bow to the Demon Queen's threats and advanced against her. Playing along, Abyss challenged him to attack her with everything he had. Meanwhile, she affirmed that this was the perfect opportunity to find an opening and strike him. However, the boy smiled radiantly, enjoying the role play. Then he struck the Demon Queen, who pretended to feel the impact. Jumping back, she said that was enough for the day and that she would let him escape, bidding farewell to the brave hero. Abyss then flew quickly away, while the boy waved enthusiastically. Back at the castle, sitting on the steps with her head down, the Demon Queen lamented having failed again, questioning why she had even gone there. According to the ancient scriptures, the chosen one who would descend from the heavens to defeat the Demon King carried a destiny with him. Back in the forest, a little girl was crying on the ground after tripping and dropping her basket of apples. At that moment, the little hero appeared and asked if she was okay. With a gentle smile, he extended his hand to help her up. Shortly after, he helped her walk, supporting her while she still held her basket. Arriving at the village, the villagers spotted the hero approaching. Soon, the villagers gathered, and a man asked what had happened, and the little girl explained that the hero saved her in the forest. The girl's mother pulled her close, while the man said that she, the girl, didn't need to have come all the way there. The little girl then tried to thank the hero, but her mother interrupted her, saying it wasn't necessary. Then, observing our protagonist from afar, the villagers whispered among themselves, commenting that, despite being a child, rumors said he turned into a beast when angered. Hearing the whispers, the boy lowered his head, revealing the sadness on his face. Hidden high in a tree, Abyss watched everything in silence. Then, a village elder approached and respectfully called the boy. He explained that despite their gratitude, some villagers were scared, and because of that, he was no longer welcome in that place. But, with a radiant smile, the hero said he understood and promised to return only if they needed him again someday, asking them not to worry. Next, he turned naturally and walked alone away from the village without looking back. And as soon as he moved away, Abyss suddenly appeared before him, blocking his path. Coldly, she said she had been watching him, startling the boy and making him let out an involuntary cry. Without wasting time, the Demon Queen questioned him about the situation, wanting to know why he didn't respond to the villagers' whispers. Irritated, she pressed him, asking if he didn't feel anger for having helped and yet being rejected without any thanks. But the boy retorted that a true hero doesn't seek rewards and would never get irritated with those he tried to protect. Grinding her teeth, she complained that his logic made no sense and criticized the fact that he only talked about being a hero, and confronted him directly, demanding to know why he insisted so much on being called a hero, even when treated with such injustice. Then, a silence settled between the two under the cutting wind that swept the deserted hill. And with his head bowed, the boy finally said that there was a promise he needed to fulfill. With that, he regained Abyss's attention attention, who became curious. Then the boy told that he had promised his deceased grandfather that he would become a brave hero. And upon hearing those words, the Demon Queen looked down, and with tears streaming down his face, he explained that to fulfill this promise, he needed to be strong and kind. Smiling, the boy declared that being a hero was the destiny he had chosen for himself. Confused, Abyss asked why he was crying, and our little hero, caught by surprise, just stammered, trying to hide his emotion. Amidst the tears, he tried to justify himself, saying he shouldn't cry because he was a hero, but Abyss gently interrupted him, asking him not to blame himself. With a gentle touch on his face, Abyss consoled him, saying that he was already brave and was trying harder than anyone. But wiping the tears with his arm, the boy denied, stating that he still needed to do much more to deserve the title. Then, without hesitating, Abyss hugged him, listening to his venting that he would keep trying, even if it seemed useless. At this, the Demon Queen asked him to say nothing more and just cry, because she knew that one day, when he became truly strong, perhaps he wouldn't even be able to cry anymore. The boy then buried his face in her chest, crying with all the strength he had left, and Abyss hugged him firmly, offering the only comfort she could at that moment. She just sighed, letting her real mission get lost in the wind. And from afar, a mysterious figure observed them, finding all of that a big surprise. The next day, Abyss appeared again, determined, affirming to herself that she needed to act fast before the hero's power awakened completely. But upon returning to the training spot, she noticed the boy wasn't there. Without wasting time, she went to the cave where she had left him the night before, determined to check what was happening. And entering the place, she called for Yu. Suddenly, she widened her eyes in shock upon seeing him lying down, covered, sweating and groaning in pain, with strange marks appearing on his arm. The boy's contorted face made clear the agony taking over his defenseless body. Observing carefully, Abyss soon identified the cause: evil toxin, a deadly poison circulating in the fangs and claws of demons. And she concluded that the infection had started in the wound left by General Lion during the fight. Noting the time the poison took to act, she understood that the hero's latent power had held back the effects for a while. And with a subtle smile on her lips, the Demon Queen realized that finally, this was the perfect opportunity she had been waiting for. She knew that demon poison was incurable for humans, and that if she let things run their course, the boy would certainly die without a chance of salvation. Then, Abyss affirmed that this would be the end of the hero, and with that, she would finally be free from the threat he represented. Then, she prepared to silently witness the inevitable fall of the one who dared to challenge her destiny. But while observing, the boy groaned and writhed in pain, involuntarily drawing a drop of sweat from Abyss's face. Suddenly, she let out a cry of shock, seeing him suffer even more, unable to ignore what was happening before her eyes. Her gaze filled with tears, betrayed by her own emotions that she fought to suppress at all costs. Painful memories invaded her mind, bringing back the day she watched, helpless, the slow death of her predecessor. Blaming herself for not having been strong enough, now facing this small boy, she felt the same crushing anguish from that bitter memory. Trying to push away the useless thoughts, Abyss took a deep breath and tried to regain her imposing posture. But at that instant, the boy slowly opened his eyes and with a weak and trembling voice, called for his master. With watery eyes, the boy asked why she was crying. At this, Abyss touched her own face, confused, questioning aloud the reason for the tears. Meanwhile, the boy remained lying down, visibly struggling to stay awake. Despite the intense pain, he clenched his hand tightly, resisting the evil taking over his small and fragile body. Seeing that, Abyss's face became wet again, and at the same instant, the little hero raised his trembling hand, trying to wipe away her tears. Then, the Demon Queen let out a yell, asking what he was doing. And with a trembling voice, our protagonist just asked her not to cry. Even almost strengthless, the boy tried to smile, saying he would recover soon and that it was just a minor pain. And facing Abyss, he admitted that he felt much better just having her there by his side in that difficult moment. Hearing those words, the Demon Queen didn't know how to react to that avalanche of feelings. The boy let out a faint groan of pain. Quickly, Abyss let out a cry calling for him, who was now so weakened that he had lost consciousness. With her hair covering her face, she murmured that it was enough and asked him not to worry. Then, raising her clenched fist, she promised to end his suffering right then and there. But instead of hitting him, blood started dripping from her own wounded hand. A short time later, the boy woke up stretching, completely refreshed and smiling. And touching his own face, he realized, surprised, that the pain had completely vanished. And while he had no idea that demon poison could only be neutralized by the blood of a stronger demon. Far away, walking through the castle corridors, Abyss lamented that, once again, she hadn't had the courage to kill him, but swore that next time she wouldn't fail. With that, a quick memory showed her face bathed in tears while she cared for the poisoned boy. And while she remained seated on the castle floor, her lackeys observed her without understanding anything. The next day, back in the forest, Abyss calculated how many chances she had already missed, but reaffirmed her determination to defeat him that day until she heard the boy's excited voice calling for her from afar. With a radiant smile, the boy approached with a basket full of freshly picked vegetables, suggesting they eat together again. Internally, Abyss screamed at herself not to be a coward and to resist that absurd cuteness that threatened to dismantle her once more. Then she wondered what the hero's true weakness might be, trying to find a point she could exploit. And, observing the garden, Abyss asked why he had chosen only certain vegetables, making our little hero swallow hard. With a red face and awkwardly, the boy admitted he couldn't stand peppers, barely able to hide his repulsion. Soon, the Demon Queen confirmed that this was his weakness, and commented that this could be useful. Then, with a stern look, Abyss pointed at him and shouted that, with that attitude, he would never defeat the Demon Queen, leaving the boy in shock. Now, determined, the boy promised to try his best to overcome his weakness and eat the peppers without hesitation. Maliciously, the Demon Queen affirmed that this was an infallible strategy: exploit his weakness, push him to his mental limit, and attack him at his most vulnerable moment. And crossing her arms, she admitted to herself that overcoming a weakness wasn't so simple, since even she didn't like peppers. Then, the boy closed his eyes bravely and took a bite of the raw pepper, trying to ignore the bitter taste exploding in his mouth. Seeing his distraction, Abyss identified the perfect opening to attack, but the boy, making a face of disgust, complained about the horrible taste. And startled by the shout, Abyss affirmed that she had almost been fooled into thinking he was vulnerable. Suddenly, a brilliant idea popped into her mind, and turning to Abyss, he enthusiastically asked his master to teach him how to like peppers, leaving her completely speechless. And he explained that being strong, she probably knew how to deal with that terrible taste. But the Demon Queen just stammered, asking why she was being dragged into this. Then, the boy insinuated that perhaps his master didn't like peppers either, increasing her panic even more. Desperate, she vehemently denied it, claiming she liked them, even though she became visibly red. Quickly, she announced she would show him a delicious dish made with peppers, while the boy, excited, immediately offered to help. And as she began to prepare the meal, Abyss reflected that she had gotten herself into a strange situation, but decided to go ahead, convinced that meat would help disguise the taste. A short time later, the Demon Queen's creation, meat-stuffed peppers, was ready, looking surprisingly delicious. Still a bit unsure, Abyss invited the boy to eat, admitting awkwardly that it was the first time she had prepared that dish. Nervously, she watched apprehensively, silently wondering if the boy would actually like the food. The boy then took a generous bite of the stuffed pepper, chewing with unexpected enthusiasm. With this, Abyss was shocked and flushed, unable to believe his positive reaction to the improvised dish. With his mouth full, the boy praised his master, saying she was incredible and wondering if peppers could really be so tasty. Meanwhile, Abyss tried to downplay it, embarrassed, saying it was nothing special. Then, our little hero stated that eating together with someone was very pleasant, making a faint smile appear on Abyss's lips. And, well, apparently the almighty Demon Queen thought the same. Excited, the boy held another pepper and fearlessly declared he no longer disliked them, making Abyss encourage him to eat more. Suddenly, she threw her arms up in despair, mentally screaming that she had unintentionally helped the hero overcome his weakness. Abyss despaired even more upon realizing that in the end, she had ended up strengthening the very person she was supposed to weaken. And, looking at her own plate, she noticed she had also managed to eat a bit of the pepper, accepting the irony of the situation. Well, in the end, both had become stronger. Then Abyss suggested that this time it had been a draw, but the boy, still chewing, just looked at her confused, not understanding what she meant. The next day, outside the cave, Abyss prepared herself, affirming to herself that, on that day, she would finally defeat the hero as the true Demon Queen. And determined, she called the boy, saying it was time to train. Upon entering, she found him sitting at a small improvised table, writing with a quill. Surprised by the sudden visit, he turned around quickly. Curious, Abyss asked if that was a letter he was writing, but the boy, embarrassed, turned his back and asked her not to look. He explained that he was writing to his future companions, those who would help him defeat the Demon Queen. At this, Abyss froze, starting to sweat coldly, mentally repeating the boy's words in her mind. Gently pushing Abyss out of the cave, the boy said that this was very important and asked her to wait outside just for a little bit. Now outside, the Demon Queen reflected furiously that all the effort to infiltrate and gain the boy's trust had been precisely to prevent moments like this. And now she faced a serious threat. Determined, she concluded that she needed to prevent his companions from appearing by any means necessary. And peeking from behind a rock near the entrance, she saw the boy humming softly while writing his letter with great enthusiasm. Then, Abyss thought about how she could steal that letter, even considering discreetly burning it using her fire magic. Suddenly, the boy wondered how to write a specific word, catching her by surprise and making her question if he was practicing calligraphy. With this, the Demon Queen looked away, asking if poor Yu didn't know how to write. Embarrassed, Abyss confirmed her suspicion, while the boy calmly returned to the table, trying to decipher the words on his own. She watched him in silence, feeling guilty seeing him struggle so much to finish the letter without relying on her. And she wondered if those companions were really so important to him as to make him persist like that. She then clenched her hand tightly. Shortly after, the boy finished writing. Next, he ran out of the cave looking for Abyss and calling for her enthusiastically. As soon as he moved away, she took the opportunity to sneak into the cave and approach the table. Thinking quickly, she concluded that if she destroyed that single piece of paper, our little hero's companions would never reach him. And, with a cold look, Abyss raised her hand and conjured her black flames at her fingertips, prepared to incinerate the letter and crush any hope of reinforcement for the boy. Then she extended her hand, but before burning it, she stopped and felt conflicted with herself. A quick memory flashed in her mind of the poor boy with his head bowed, struggling to understand the difficult words. The sight of that effort seemed to hit Abyss hard, who placed a hand on her chest. At that exact moment, the boy returned to the cave and, upon seeing her there, smiled relieved. He approached, catching Abyss by surprise near the table, making her stammer, unsure of what to say. Without noticing her internal conflict, the boy picked up the envelope from the table, and extended it to Abyss, gently asking her to read the letter. He smiled expectantly, holding the envelope with both hands. Completely shocked and flushed, Abyss asked incredulously if the letter was really for her. Still hesitant, she began to slowly open the envelope, revealing the content written with effort by the little hero. In the letter, the boy thanked her for all the daily training and invited her to defeat the Demon Queen together. Surprised, Abyss asked if that was the first letter he had ever written and questioned about the so-called companions. But the boy, smiling, explained that he always imagined his first letter would be to his master, and that's why he kept it a secret. He affirmed that there was no one else besides her, making her finally realize everything. With a red face and holding the letter against her chest, Abyss realized that she was the only person he had ever written to in his life. And completely embarrassed, she understood that her previous relief came only from the absence of other threatening companions. Then, the boy repeated with purity his desire to, together, defeat all evil. But reality soon hit, and she realized that the Demon Queen was actually herself. Back in the dark castle, Abyss, seated on her imposing throne, silently reread the little hero's letter. Then a genuine and warm smile appeared behind her mask, warming her heart as she absorbed every sincere word written for her. But shortly after, Abyss writhed on the throne under the suspicious gaze of her demonic guards. In the midst of all that internal conflict, the Demon Queen continued rereading the letter, lost in her own turbulent thoughts that she could no longer control. Noticing her agitation, one of her subordinates suggested she rest a bit, but Abyss refused, saying it wasn't necessary as the previous Demon King never rested. But the lackeys insisted, begging her to take a break, assuring her they would handle the rest. With that, she reluctantly agreed. Now free from the castle duties, Abyss wondered if she should take the opportunity to go check on the hero. Then, in the forest, she observed the boy training with his sword, reaffirming her strategy of pretending to be his master to find an opportunity and defeat him. Determined, she affirmed that, as Demon Queen, she needed to assert her authority and eliminate the hero as quickly as possible. And sighing, Abyss realized there was no time for rest. Soon, the boy noticed her presence. The next day, Abyss found the boy trying to spread a heavy futon on an improvised clothesline outside the cave. Seeing her approach, he smiled relieved, saying she had arrived just in the nick of time. With a radiant smile, he asked for help carrying the futon. Now, inside the hero's cave, Abyss found herself lying next to the boy, who smiled peacefully with his eyes closed. Confused, she wondered how she ended up there, while the boy, opening his eyes, commented excitedly about how comfortable the freshly dried futon was. She then questioned why she was there, and he explained that he wanted his master to rest well, making Abyss think that he acted exactly like her subordinates. Internally, she affirmed that she couldn't sleep, as she would lose the chance to watch him, declaring that sleeping would be a defeat. To make matters worse, the boy showed flowers he had picked, saying they would help her sleep better, making the Demon Queen think about how much he tried to make her rest. Then, he began to sing a lullaby, while Abyss gritted her teeth, swearing she wouldn't fall asleep, and that as Demon Queen, she wouldn't be fooled by a child. But in the end, his small, gentle hand touched her forehead softly. Then, she began to call his name, while he gave small taps on her forehead. Our little hero explained with a smile that his grandfather grandfather used to do that to help him sleep deeply. And feeling drowsiness take over, Abyss wondered where she knew that comforting sensation from. Suddenly a memory surfaced, a much younger version of herself, running and crying desperately across a devastated battlefield. In that memory, a dark figure asked if she was a survivor and invited her to go with him. The figure extended his hand, and little Abyss clung to his leg, feeling a comforting relief. Suddenly, Abyss opened her eyes abruptly and woke up startled, wondering when that had happened. Sitting up, Abyss questioned how she had been able to fall asleep in the presence of a child, feeling humiliated, but admitting that somehow she felt a little better. Worried, she wondered about the hero's state and, turning around, found him sleeping soundly beside her. Then she reflected if he too had succumbed to a heavy sleep. The boy rested, breathing slowly and peacefully. Observing him sleep, Abyss blushed slightly, aware that, once again, that moment offered her an opportunity she shouldn't waste. But the silent and cozy atmosphere reminded her of the security she had felt on that distant day. In silence, she just watched him and decided that, for that day, she would let it pass, postponing her mission once again. Then she lay down beside him again and fell asleep. And in the middle of the night, Abyss woke up startled once more, complaining about having overslept. The next day, walking through the forest under heavy rain, Abyss stated that she should have stayed home that day. But with her hand outstretched and a determined look, she affirmed that this would definitely be the big day she would succeed in her mission. Until suddenly, she jumped back, startled upon stepping into a mud puddle. It's then that she heard a familiar voice calling for her. And soon, a giant creature made of mud appeared, holding a wooden sword with a smile plastered on its face. Stunned, she heard the creature say that the hero didn't stop training even in the rain, and questioned internally if that was really little Yu. Without thinking twice, our little hero threw himself at her, spreading dirt everywhere. A short time later, covered in mud, Abyss bathed little Yu, while grumbling about getting dirty. Yu insisted he could wash himself, but Abyss, impatient, said his back also needed cleaning. And internally, the Demon Queen realized that, once again, she had the perfect chance before her to attack him by surprise. However, instead of acting, her hands just rested gently on the boy's soapy head. With this, she panicked, realizing that again she was surrendering to that vulnerable and naive side he showed. The boy tried to understand her hesitation, while Abyss struggled against her own internal conflict. It was at that moment that she unintentionally noticed the old scar marked on her own abdomen, bringing painful memories to the surface. Quickly, she covered the mark with her hands and, overcome with shame, tried to hide her past scars. With this, Abyss remembered that every time she saw that scar, she recalled the day of the battle for the throne of the next Demon King. And, well, it's flashback time. After an arduous fight, Abyss was declared victorious and crowned as the new Demon Queen before everyone. Even in victory, she felt ashamed, knowing she needed to demonstrate overwhelming power to prove her true worth. Her subordinates constantly compared her to her predecessor, increasing the burden she carried on her still inexperienced shoulders. With this, Abyss saw in that old wound the living memory of her weakness, the mark of inexperience that tormented her so much. She felt she couldn't possibly face her predecessor in that state, fearing she would become an unworthy Demon Queen if she continued to falter. Back in the present, touching the scar beneath her fingers, Abyss affirmed to herself that now was different, that she was no longer the hesitant newcomer from before. And clenching her fist tightly, she silently swore she would defeat the hero and prove her worth once and for all. Completely oblivious to this turmoil, the boy also clenched his fists and shouted excitedly, caught up in the moment. Surprised, the Demon Queen questioned the sudden reaction, and the boy, with an innocent and radiant smile, asked if she had fought for something important and remained firm even after taking so much damage. With admiration in his eyes, he declared that the mark on her belly was a true wound of honor, something simply incredible. Then Abyss silently reflected on that innocent interpretation, letting out a faint smile. Full of enthusiasm, the boy stated that he also wanted a scar like his master's, earned after a great fight against the Demon Queen, making Abyss think that currently he could barely defeat a simple slime. Then she pondered if he really imagined fighting her to get such a wound. But quickly she realized and seemed to hesitate a bit, her courage wavering in the face of reality. Abyss, imagining his soft and fragile skin, wondered in panic if she would really be capable of hurting him, and shaking her head to push away the thoughts, she momentarily lost her composure, freaking out internally while the boy looked at her, confused, not understanding her reaction. Recovering, Abyss yelled at him, ordering him to stop relaxing and get back to training immediately, reminding him that he needed to become stronger, like the true Demon Queen always was. A short time later, already dressed, Abyss guided him into the forest, announcing they would begin rigorous survival training, while the boy, excited and curious, asked if there were monsters around there. But confident, the boy explained that he would spend a week alone in the forest as part of a test imposed by a certain Noel Sama, leaving Abyss confused and wondering who this girl would be. Soon, he firmly asked that his master not interfere, stating that he wanted to complete the test on on his own. Running excitedly into the dense forest, he said goodbye. Now alone, Abyss reflected that the monsters of that forest were relentless and that for someone who didn't know the terrain, getting lost was a matter of time. With that, she imagined the boy fallen and desperate, begging for help, convinced that she would soon have to intervene. Smiling presumptuously, she thought that he would probably die right there, but soon a drop of sweat ran down her face. However, quickly regaining her pose, she smiled awkwardly, reaffirming to herself that, as Demon Queen, she needed to personally witness the hero's end, without caring about his fate. Meanwhile, in the depths of the dark forest, the boy tried to set up his makeshift camp. Seeing Abyss approaching, he asked again, seriously, that she not help him, and the Demon Queen just agreed, keeping her distance, yet remaining there. But soon he stumbled, dropping his supplies on the ground, exclaiming frustratedly while awkwardly trying to gather everything back up. A short time later, he tried to hang his bag of provisions on a high branch, stretching as much as possible under Abyss's watchful and impassive gaze. But at the same moment, he ran off desperately after bumping into a huge spider web. Soon, he arrived at the bank of a river, determined to hunt his own food. And without hesitation, he threw his makeshift spear into the water, shouting for the fish to prepare for battle. Breathless and sweating, he complained that fishing was much harder than he imagined, making Abyss suggest he use a net. But the boy retorted that Noel had ordered him to use only a harpoon, leaving Abyss even more irritated and wondering again who the hell this woman he was talking about was. As he continued his frustrated struggle to catch a single fish, Abyss shouted that he was too impatient for that kind of challenge. But with eyes shining with determination, the boy affirmed that it made no sense to ask for help, as he needed to become a respectable hero by his own merit. With that, he shouted that he needed to overcome that challenge alone, without any shortcuts. Just observing him, Abyss pondered that, under the current conditions, leaving him alone seemed safe, as he would likely end up destroying himself on his own, and admitted to herself that she almost intervened, as she always did, but resisted, holding firm to her decision. Soon, she noted that this way, he definitely wouldn't survive long in that forest. Unable to catch anything, the boy slowly approached extreme hunger, and Abyss, with a subtle smile, concluded that perhaps she wouldn't even need to do anything, as he would end up killing himself, making her job much easier. Continuing his frustrated attempt, the boy missed once again, while a fish jumped out of the water, blatantly mocking his lack of skill. Abyss just watched in silence, convinced that he would undoubtedly fail pathetically. And indeed, on the next attempt, the boy lost his balance and fell face first into the water. Seeing the scene, the Demon Queen clenched her fist, fighting with all her might against the urge to help him, repeating to herself that she couldn't intervene. An internal battle began to corrode her self-control. But suddenly, the boy emerged from the water, smiling and with a fish speared on the tip of his spear. Seeing that, Abyss couldn't contain her joy and clenched her fists again, but this time, genuinely happy and proud of his success. Shortly after, the boy proudly held up the fish for her, and Abyss, realizing her own exaggerated reaction, panicked, furiously reprimanding herself for being pleased. Freaking out in her thoughts, she tried to convince herself that it meant nothing, and that she was still in control of the situation. A short time later, now under the night sky, Abyss watched the boy sleeping soundly on her shoulder. A thread of drool ran down the corner of his mouth, completely oblivious to the world around him. Then, the Demon Queen thought that, deep down, his performance didn't surprise her one bit. The next day, she carried the sleeping boy on her back through the forest, questioning her own actions, but resigned to the situation she herself had created. With that, faint smile appeared on her lips. But soon, the memory of the boy mentioning Noel Sama returned to her mind, leaving her intrigued about who this mysterious person might be. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps approached, and a hooded figure appeared, reprimanding Abyss for hindering the hero's training. Shocked, the Demon Queen wondered who that woman was. Then, she removed her hood, revealing herself to be a blonde woman with glasses and immense breasts, who stated that Abyss's presence scared away the monsters, meaning the stronger the being, the greater the fear, calling her directly by her title, Demon Queen. Enraged and with black flames enveloping her hand, Abyss demanded to know who this impudent woman was who dared to challenge her. Then, the woman introduced herself as Noel, the great sage tasked with guiding the hero on his journey to save the world. And at the same time, Abyss wondered how that woman could see through her carefully constructed disguise. At that moment, the boy began to wake up. Noel called him by the title Hero, while Abyss called him by the name You, unintentionally exposing the intimate relationship she had built. Soon, the blonde hugged him, leaving the Demon Queen completely shocked. Happy to see her, the boy asked when she had returned, and she, with a gentle smile, replied that she had just arrived. Observing the interaction, Abyss clicked her tongue tongue, visibly jealous. Then the Demon Queen demanded that he immediately explain who that woman was. With a smile, the boy introduced Noel as the Great Sage, explaining that her family had the task of protecting and training brave souls for generations. And he excitedly stated that he was doing his best in the test proposed by her, making her praise him. The boy then mentioned that he was also being trained by his master, making Noel ask who he was talking about. Abyss remained silent. With that, Noel suggested that the hero continue resting and said she wanted to talk to his master alone. Now, elsewhere, the blonde warned Abyss, saying she was telling her in advance. And addressing her directly as Demon Queen, Noel stated that she would keep her true identity secret. Suspicious, our protagonist asked what Noel was plotting, but the sage denied any plan, saying she was only thinking of the hero's well-being, and explained that the boy was still just an immature child, and that if he discovered that his beloved master was, in fact, the Demon Queen, his heart would break and his immense power would likely go out of control. Then, remembering the strength he showed against Lion, Abyss recognized the danger that represented, and holding her staff tightly, Noel stated that she was not happy at all with this whole situation. Then, the two faced each other, and Noel asked Abyss to please not interfere anymore. And after this conversation, Abyss watched her walk away. Then, she reaffirmed to herself that she was only doing this to defeat the hero, and that she couldn't give up.